Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father." Going to leave it there. If you're here on Friday, you'll hear a bit more. So this story of Jesus, perhaps so well known, tells of a father and 2 sons. And it begins with this bold moment, the younger of the 2 sons, "Father, give me my share of the estate." Quite a bold request, a bold ask, but if you don't ask. Have you ever wondered what might have happened, though, if the father in the story hadn't done as the son asked? No gift, not even any conditions attached to the gift. Well, the story would look very different. Wouldn't actually be much of a story at all, was it? Not even half a story. This is a story about so many different things, and like so many of Jesus' stories, they speak to us on all sorts of levels, and we get different things at different times, even if we know it like the back of our hand, this story. It will never cease to find a little gem or a little something that we perhaps haven't noticed before. And if you've been listening to sermons for a while, you will have probably heard many sermons on this story. So much that could be said. But it begins as a story about letting go. The father, in his generosity, some might say in his foolishness, gives the gift and lets his son go. He lets him go, possibly to make mistakes. He lets him go with all the potential for this to go horribly wrong, which of course it does. The father doesn't refuse the request or ask loads of questions. Part of his being the sort of father that he is lies in his relinquishing of control, granting his son a freedom to succeed or to fail, a releasing of his son. In short, the father in this story is not a control freak. A control freak would want to know how the money would be spent, that it wouldn't be frittered away, would want to know how this resource that's been given would be used, would want to know the minutiae of the son's plans. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go with my money? Or at the very least would want to put conditions in place. I'll give you this, but in return, I expect ... And yet, with all the ambiguity of this potentially precarious situation, with all the unknowns, the gift is given. So much follows in the story, as you may know. Thousands of sermons preached on the father, the younger son, the elder son, and all the different dynamics. But it all starts with this generous gift, which is far more than the gift of half an inheritance. It's the gift of freedom, a relinquishing of control. And maybe what Jesus, the great storyteller, maybe what he's pointing to is a heavenly Father who in some way is like that. A heavenly Father who desires the best for us, who generously offers a gift to us, but a heavenly Father who himself doesn't grasp onto control of how that gift will be used to its full potential, or half potential, or not at all. And a heavenly Father who doesn't put conditions in place. This isn't about the Father in the story not caring. It's not about our Heavenly Father not caring. He absolutely does care to the very core of his being, and he absolutely does want the very best for the son in the story, and for the gift, and for us, and for the gift that we are given. But part of this perfect care is an entrusting of this love into our hands and not controlling what we might do with it, how we might use it and delight in it, or how we might abuse it or even reject it. If we stop to think for a moment, this is an awesome thing. Paul, in his second letter to the Corinthians, talks about an indescribable gift. Thanks be to God for this indescribable gift. There are no words for this gift. Whatever follows in the story that Jesus tells here and begins with, whatever follows on in your story or my story, it all begins here with the Father entrusting something incredibly precious and at the same time entrusting it very precariously. Precarious because it's in our hands. And so much of Jesus' teaching, if we think about it, was offered in this way. He didn't force people to understand his stories and his sayings. He allowed people to take his words and make of them what they would. That's risky, but it's the sort of way that Jesus taught. He offers and invites a response. He doesn't dictate what our response will be. Indeed, his whole life was offered in that way, culminating with his cruel execution, not controlling how people would react or respond, not controlling what people would do with his love or his sacrifice. In nearly every sense, he was totally out of control over those days, and yet offered freely, with a heart that so wants the best for us, longs for us to discover, as the son in the story did, how precious the gift is. Not just the money, the inheritance, but more, the gift of freedom. Freedom to choose, freedom to fail, freedom to succeed, freedom to discover life in its fullness or not to. How deep indeed is the Father's love for us. And we echo St. Paul. Thanks be to God for his indescribable gift.